What's going on, champs and chambettes? It's FireMonkey here, and it's time to hop in game and heist those mythic weapons because Epic Games has officially released their first balancing update for the most recent version of Fortnite, V26.10, and with it came a lot of interesting things. They have some buffs here and there, but they also have some nerfs here and there, so it all adds up to a very interesting experience, and in today's YouTube video, we'll be going through all of the buffs and nerfs you need to know. However, I want to start off by talking about one of the nerfs, which relates to the sticky grenade launcher. Oh hey, I actually managed to find this, okay. You know what, hold on. Firstly, I want to show you guys a little trick here. If you want to complete the birthday present challenge real easily, drop it on the ground 3 times, pick it back up, and it actually counts and completes that way. But with that said, back to the topic at hand, which is relating to buffs and nerfs, we have to talk about the whole entire sticky grenade launcher, because Epic Games has actually nerfed it in a pretty interesting way. Firstly, they nerfed it by going ahead and lowering the fire rate from 84 to 72, meaning that when you're actually shooting with it, you'll actually shoot a lot slower for each shot, so you know you have to wait a little bit longer than before when it comes to actually shooting the grenade launcher. This is a kind of combat the whole entire spam system a lot of people have been doing recently, where they will go to a location or, you know, go into a fight with an enemy with this actual grenade launcher, and they will switch between multiple of them rapid fire style, right? They'll go between one, shoot it, go between next, shoot it, and keep switching between the two, so that they can absolutely just spam out rockets, or I guess, you know, sticky grenades non-stop towards all of their enemies. That will no longer be a thing due to the fire rate being decreased, you know, making it slower already to actually shoot the rockets, or I guess, you know, the sticky grenades on their own. But on top of that, the reload time has been increased by 0.6 seconds, meaning it's going to take a little bit over half of a second to, further than before to actually reload your weapon when you're going ahead and using it. So you'll notice how whenever you reload, it might feel a little sluggish or, you know, just slow overall. That is because of this reload change, right? That is because of how they're handling all the little changes here and there to the game. But of course, that is one of the things to keep your eyes out on, is that the weapon itself will be reloading a lot slower, and that's just something you kind of got to get used to, right? But on top of that, they've added a swap cooldown. So when you swap between sticky grenade launchers, it will actually have a 1.25 second cooldown before you can shoot from the other grenade launcher. Through my testing, it appears that it's still faster than, you know, just shooting the grenades normally through the sticky grenade launcher, but it still is a decrease that is going to take some time to get used to whenever you're going ahead and throwing, you know, the grenades out there. Because, you know, if you're used to the old method or whatever that was getting used a lot, or people were swapping back and forth between them and just absolutely going ham, you know, exploding everything in sight, that won't be as viable anymore, right? So you just gotta keep that in mind. You know, in terms of the sticky grenade launcher, it's just gotten a lot of nerfs right here that make it a lot slower overall when it comes to the fire rate, because the fire rate was the main issue of this weapon. And now if we go over to the mythic area, if we look over here, we have 3 weapons. We have the Kit's Shockwave Launcher over there, we have the Midas Drum Gun, and then in the middle, we have Gunner Stinger SMG. While 2 of those 3 weapons weren't modified, being, you know, Kit's Shockwave Launcher and of course Midas's Drum Gun, the middle weapon, being Gunner Stinger SMG, actually has seen a modification with this most recent update, and believe it or not, it's a buff. So before we actually go ahead and showcase that to you guys, since we got a grenade launcher over here, I want to show you guys quickly how it actually works. If we go ahead and hold down the actual shoot button, you'll notice how it goes very, very slow, right? If I even like tap the button, it is a lot slower than before, and reloading super slow as well, especially trying to get all 4 bullets in there. It takes some time, but you can definitely see the little effects right here in terms of how slow the reloading has become on that actual weapon. So it is one of those iffier picks nowadays. But when it comes to the actual Gunner Stinger SMG, we've only seen buffs for this. So if you're someone who hasn't used it at all this season, one thing you may have noticed is that the recoil was absolutely insane, right? The recoil would always go up to the heavens and everything, right? You would be praying to the gods and everything above whenever you're using it. However, they've decreased the recoil from 7.0 to 5.5, and as you can see right there, it is so much more controllable. We are able to keep our sights exactly on the enemies, and it makes Gunner Stinger SMG a really, really solid pick to actually go ahead and use whenever you're getting into combat, because it doesn't have the massive amount of recoil, and, you know, it still has a decent amount. Like, if we just go here and, you know, not even try to control the recoil at all, it does go up a decent amount to the top of the mountain when we're aiming like towards the bottom of it. But with recoil control and everything, it is so much easier to master, and it's definitely one of the weapons that I'm excited to use once again, because of course, you know, it's just a fun little thing to use, right? It's just a fun journey to go down using the actual weapon and just watching as, you know, I can demolish some enemies with it thanks to the lower recoil. On top of that though, they also increased the damage by 1, so instead of doing 22 damage per hit, it's actually going to do 23 damage now. So, you know, overall just some decent buffs. In terms of other things, things, we are going to go ahead and talk about the nerfs first, and then we'll talk about the rest of the buffs second. So firstly, we have the Foundation's Mark 7 Assault Rifle. Foundation's MK7 Assault Rifle, whatever you want to call it, has actually been nerfed with the fire rate lowered from 10 to 9.5, meaning it has a slightly slower fire rate. It still is pretty rapid fire, right? It still is going to shoot a lot more than before, but it does have that lower rate of fire so that, it is slightly less overpowered. It also had the damage lowered by 1, so instead of doing 23 damage per shot, it now does 22 damage per shot. So, slower fire rate and slightly less damage all combining together to make an interesting combination for whenever you're using this in your matches. And of course, it's going to take more testing to figure out if these changes are something that's going to make the weapon more detrimental, or if it's still going to laser through enemies like it did before. And then for the final set of changes here, we have to talk about Slurp Juice. They've actually made it so the drop rate of Slurp Juice has been insanely nerfed. So firstly, combat caches will now drop 1 instead of 2. POI banners, such as those little flags you capture at different POIs. So if we look over here, for example, things over at Breakwater Bay, we'll go ahead and go that way so I can actually show you guys. Those will drop less depending on which mode you're in. So if you're in solos, you'll only get 1. If you're in duos, you'll only get 2 Slurp Juices. If you're in trios, you'll only get 3. And then of course, if you're in squads, you only get 4. So that's a little bit of an interesting thing to see them doing with the whole entire POI banners, because before this, it always felt like a pretty standardized system where you got the same amount of Slurp Juices regardless of the mode you're actually playing in, right? So if you're playing in duos, you would still get like 4 or 5 or whatever else, whereas now it's definitely been like halved across the board. So if we go over here, and keep in mind this is a bot lobby, so I am in duos, we should only get 2 Slurp Juices from actually capturing this POI banner. Alright, now that we've actually had the POI banner captured, we can see that I actually didn't get any Slurp Juices at all. Oh yeah, okay. That makes a little bit of sense. I get why I didn't get any, because POI banners will actually, have a whole entire system where they don't always give you Slurp Juices, and, sometimes it's going to give you some, sometimes it won't. So I guess that was a terrible way of actually showcasing how they'll drop it, right? But when they do drop Slurp Juices and everything for you to obtain, I assume by POI banners, it mainly is going to be related to, the actual drop in, loot island that spawns during the middle of matches, because that guarantees you them. It will give you a lot less than you're used to just because of how they made the changes. They've also done this with the radio tower bosses, which we can go ahead and show you guys if we go ahead and run over here to one of the bosses, by making it so just like the POI banners, it will drop different amounts of Slurp Juices depending on the squad size. So if you're in solos, you only get 1, if you're in duos, you only get 2, if you're in trios, there's 3, and if you're in squad, there's 4. The whole entire point of these changes is kind of make it so it's like, hey, if you're going around and trying to get some Slurp Juices, all the sources that would typically give you Slurp Juices are going to be lowered to only giving you 1 per person in your team, to make it so it's not like you're going to have an extra, clutter in your inventory where it's like, oh yeah, I have 3 stacks in my inventory full to the brim of Slurp Juice, right? The whole entire point and focus is just making it so nothing is seen as too overpowered, and there was a lot of people who, would use Slurp Juices, carry so many of them, and use that as their overpowered way of winning games, because, it was a quick use, it was something that always made it so you could easily get some wins, because, if you're in a sticky situation, you pop it, and then you pop another one, non-stop, just keep using them, and you'll be back up to max shield and health very, very quickly. So, it does make sense that you're going to do these little changes here to try changing the tide of normal matches, so it isn't always just, if you have Slurp Juices, you're saved. So we go over here real quickly, and we actually fight the boss, which I'm going to go ahead and use Gunner's Stinger SMG, just because, changes and everything else. You can see that 1, does a pretty decent amount of damage, not gonna lie, but 2, once we actually eliminate, we don't get nearly as many Slurp Juices as before. Since this is a duos, technically because of it being a bot lobby, and, I'm just kind of in a duos lobby by myself, we only got 2 here, but before, it would drop so many, right? It felt like, you were getting like a massive just stockpile in your inventory, like if the radio tower guard was hoarding them up before an episode of Hoarders or something, whereas now, you get a decent, modest amount, 1 per person on your team, and it's going to be interesting to see how this change actually affects the live gameplay. I think that is completely fine how it is. However, everyone's going to have their own opinions as we continue to see how it changes, the meta of Fortnite as everything keeps evolving. In terms of other things that have happened, though, we have some few buffs to talk about here. Firstly, one of my favorite weapons, being Zig and Choppy's ray gun, has gotten a buff, with the fire rate being increased from 15 to 16, so slightly faster fire rate, but also the minimum charge time has been decreased from 0.5 to 0.2. To explain what a charge time is, think about it like this. Whenever you actually use the weapon, there is a split period of time before you actually start firing where you have to charge up the weapon in order to shoot an enemy, whereas now that is a lot lower, meaning instead of of waiting like half a second to actually shoot after pressing the shoot button, now it's like waiting a quarter of a second before you actually get to shoot when pressing the shoot button, which is a super duper nice change. Just means you can fire a lot quicker and you can get those shots out more often. But you know, just having that fire rate increased and having the minimum charge time decreased just makes the whole entire weapon a lot nicer to use, even if they haven't changed the whole entire system for how it's going to deal damage to opponents. We also have the Havoc Suppressed Assault Rifle, which is the normal weapon you can find in the game, which had a few changes. Firstly, the damage has been increased by 1, so instead of doing 22 damage, it does 23. And I know that's a common thing, 22, 23, 23, 22 when it comes to the damage, but it seems like that is the solid numbers that they've been using for a lot of their assault rifle weapons recently, in, you know, just I guess weapons in general, is having 22 or 23 being the baseline for the damage numbers. But yeah, the damage has been increased by 1, and then the fire rate has been increased by 0.5, meaning that when you're actually using the Havoc Suppressed Rifle, which I'll go ahead and shoot right here, it is going to be shooting a little bit faster than you're used to, you know, just a slight little tiny bit where you may notice it if it's your main weapon to use in the game, but also it's going to be dealing slightly more damage. And then for the final set of changes, we have to talk about TNTina's Boom Bow. The reload time has been decreased from 1.296 seconds to 1 second flat, meaning that, you know, it will have a quarter less of a second, you know, in terms of reload time that you have to actually wait, so you'll be reloading the weapon a lot faster. The maxed aim in time to actually trigger the explosive effect of the bow has been lowered from 2.0 to 1, meaning that you have half the time in order of aiming in before you're able to actually trigger the explosives on an arrow with the bow. So, you know, that's a nice benefit, just being able to aim in less and still getting all the explosive effects happening. You know, makes the weapon a lot more useful to use, because it felt like before this actual, you know, bug, or I guess not bug, but before this actual buff, they had it where it was just so hard to use the bow, right? I never wanted to pick it up because when you were actually waiting for it to trigger the effect, you would have to sit there and basically just aim in for like a solid 2 seconds before you were able to actually shoot the bow, when you might have been in some very close combat. So this is a very welcome change, I think, and it's definitely going to allow more people to use the bow and feel like they're actually getting a benefit of it compared to the other weapons that are available from the vaults. And then they've also changed the recharge time down to 15 seconds, so each arrow will be available in 15 seconds instead of the previous like 20 to 25 seconds it actually had, just meaning that you'll be able to use the weapon a lot more and you'll be able to actually activate the special effect of the weapon a lot more often. But overall, you know, a lot of changes here and there, a few nerfs, you know, only 3 things getting nerfed, being the Foundation's MK, the Sticky Grenade Launcher, and Slurp Juices, but a lot of buffs as well. You know, TNTina's bow, Zig and Choppy's ray gun, we also had the Havoc Suppressed Assault Rifle and Gunner's Stinger SMG, so it does seem like this is a very, very nice balancing update, and I am pretty pleased with it, to be completely honest. It's one of the updates where I don't feel is too controversial or anything. I feel the most controversial part of it is going to be the whole entire Sticky Grenade Launcher, because it was a meta at one point where people were, you know, swapping between grenade launchers super rapid fire like in order to, you know, completely demolish enemies, whereas now, you know, that's not even in existence anymore. They've got a little bit of a cooldown, making it super duper slow in order to actually pop off any of those special skills you're trying to do, such as the Sticky Grenade Launcher meta. But of course, I would love to hear in the comments down below, what do you guys think about all these changes? Do you think they're good? Do you think they're bad? Or are you somewhere in between where you're like, I didn't really care about these weapons too much or something like that, so it doesn't really matter to you? Regardless of it though, you know, it's interesting to see how this balancing change has actually been released and how it seems to be pretty well received by most of the community. You know, a lot of people are like, I still won't pick up like the Havoc Suppressed Assault Rifle, even with this buff it's actually received, but you know, it's nice to see that it's gotten a buff. You know, it's something where they're like, you know, don't care too much about some of the things, but other things are like, yeah, that's an amazing thing to see in the game. And with that said, I hope you champs and champions enjoyed today's YouTube video. Like the video if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't like it, and I'll catch you guys tomorrow with another upload. Peace out.